The world has always been full of whispers, hidden agendas, and subtle manipulations. From the courts of ancient emperors to the workplaces of modern corporations, human beings have always sought ways to control others for their own benefit. And while manipulation takes on many disguises, flattery, guilt, false promises, or intimidation, the Stoics remind us that the greatest defense is not brute force, but clarity of mind, strength of character, and unshakable principles. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire where power games and political traps were everywhere, left us a philosophy that shields the soul from deception. He understood that when you govern your own mind, no one else can govern you. These lessons are not just ancient words, they are timeless armor for your everyday battles against manipulation. The first Stoic lesson is to know yourself before others can define you. Manipulators thrive on confusion. They rely on your lack of clarity about who you are, what you value, and where you stand. If you are uncertain, they will project their definition onto you, shaping your identity to serve their interests. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that his nature was rational, that his duty was to act in accordance with virtue, not vanity. In his meditations, he did not write for the approval of others, he wrote to remind himself of who he was. When you know yourself deeply, when you have examined your values and chosen them with intention, then no praise can seduce you and no insult can wound you. You cannot be manipulated by those who seek to make you chase validation, because your validation comes from within. The second lesson is master your emotions, or they will master you. The easiest path for manipulators is through the emotions of others. Anger clouds reason, fear paralyzes, and desire blinds. A clever manipulator will play on these states, steering you toward choices that serve them, not you. The Stoics trained themselves to recognize emotions as impressions, passing waves that can be observed rather than obeyed. When Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal, he reminded himself that people act according to what they believe is good for them, even if misguided. By stepping back, by not being a slave to immediate emotion, you take away the manipulator's greatest weapon. Self-control is not weakness, it is the ultimate strength, because the calm mind is unmovable in the storms of persuasion. The third Stoic lesson is to practice the discipline of perception. Manipulation often begins with illusion, presenting things as more urgent, more dangerous, or more attractive than they are. A salesperson may inflate scarcity. A politician may exaggerate threats. A friend may dramatize a situation to push you into action. Marcus Aurelius constantly trained himself to strip appearances down to their essence. Fine wine is just fermented grapes, silk is the hair of worms, luxury is just dead fish or animal skins. This clarity cuts through the exaggerated narratives manipulators weave. When you see things as they truly are, not as they are dressed up to appear, the charm of manipulation dissolves like mist in the sun. The fourth Stoic lesson is be wary of flattery. Few tools are more seductive than praise, and few prisons are more invisible than dependence on it. Manipulators will tell you what you want to hear, inflating your ego until you are softened, vulnerable, and willing to do as they wish. Marcus Aurelius advised himself not to value the clapping of the crowd, because the crowd often has no idea what is good or noble. The applause of others can never be the measure of your worth. When you detach from the need for external validation, flattery loses its hold. Praise can be received with gratitude but not relied upon for direction. The Stoic learns to say, "I will not let your honeyed words poison my clarity." The fifth Stoic lesson is accept discomfort rather than being bribed by pleasure. Manipulation often comes in the form of rewards, shortcuts, indulgences, or temptations that lead you away from your higher path. A manipulator knows that many people can be controlled simply by dangling comfort before them. Marcus Aurelius reminds us that true freedom does not come from chasing pleasures but from being independent of them. The man who can endure hardship with dignity is immune to the one who tries to lure him with soft cushions and golden cages. To live stoically is to train yourself to accept discomfort, to strengthen your mind against seduction. Once you no longer fear struggle, the manipulator's promises of ease cannot enslave you. The sixth lesson is see through guilt and emotional debts. Manipulators love to create a sense of obligation. After all I've done for you, they'll say, or, if you don't do this, it means you don't care. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that virtue is measured by intention and principle, not by the pressure of others' demands. If someone helps you with strings attached, it is not true generosity but a transaction disguised as kindness. The Stoic answer is to honor true gratitude without allowing false guilt to direct your life. You do not owe anyone your peace, your integrity, or your freedom. A manipulator can only trap you with guilt if you accept the premise that you are responsible for their emotions. You are not. You are responsible for your actions, not their reactions. The seventh Stoic lesson is guard your attention as the most precious resource. Every manipulator seeks not just your actions but your focus. Advertisers want your eyes, demagogues want your ears, toxic people want your energy. Marcus Aurelius understood that what you pay attention to shapes your soul. He often wrote about turning inward, about not being dragged endlessly by distractions. If you scatter your attention, you make yourself vulnerable to every influence around you. But if you concentrate it on what is essential, virtue, reason, duty, you create a fortress within. The Stoic does not waste time arguing with fools, does not obsess over gossip, does not surrender the mind to noise. Attention is sovereignty. To control your attention is to deny manipulators their entry point. The eighth lesson is do not argue with reality. Manipulators often build their power by convincing you to resist what already is, to chase fantasies of how things could be if only you followed their lead. They dangle illusions, hoping you will waste your strength fighting the present. But Marcus Aurelius was relentless in reminding himself, the world is as it is. To rage against it is to lose energy, to be swept up in passions that can be redirected by others. The Stoic accepts reality fully, not with resignation, but with clarity. And from this clarity, they act with power. When you accept reality instead of being lured by fantasies, manipulators cannot steer you into endless dissatisfaction. You become grounded, impossible to uproot. The ninth Stoic lesson is do not fear being alone. Many people are manipulated simply because they cannot bear solitude. They cling to relationships, groups, or approval, even when those connections drain their strength. Manipulators know this weakness and exploit it. Marcus Aurelius, though surrounded by armies, advisors, and citizens, often reminded himself that the soul is strongest when it can stand alone in reason. He wrote of retreating into his inner fortress whenever the world was noisy and chaotic. To be content with your own company is to be free from the manipulator who tries to make you dependent on theirs. Loneliness is a weapon only against those who fear it. For the Stoic, solitude is not emptiness but power. The 10th Stoic lesson is remember the manipulators often operate by elevating themselves as higher beings, more important, more knowledgeable, more powerful. They create hierarchies of control where others are conditioned to obey. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, the most powerful man in the known world, constantly reminded himself that he was made of the same flesh, destined for the same death, subject to the same nature as any other person. By remembering this equality, he guarded himself against both arrogance and submission. No one is a god over you. No title, no wealth, no charm gives another the right to control your soul. The Stoic sees through the illusion of superiority and refuses to kneel before false idols. The 11th Stoic lesson is examine the intentions behind words, not just the words themselves. Manipulators are skilled with language. They know how to twist phrases, how to use charm, how to appeal to your desires and fears with clever sentences. But Marcus Aurelius taught that words are only signals, what matters is the intention that drives them. If a person's motives are selfish, deceitful, or rooted in vice, then even the most beautiful words are poison. To defend yourself, you must listen not just with your ears but with your reason. Ask, what does this person stand to gain? What is their true purpose? When you analyze intentions, you cut through the sugarcoating. Manipulation cannot survive the piercing gaze of a questioning mind. The 12th Stoic lesson is detach from outcomes you cannot control. A manipulator thrives on your obsession with results. They tempt you by promising success, threaten you with the possibility of failure, and push you into actions driven by anxiety over what might happen. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that only his own choices belonged to him, everything else lay in the hands of fortune. The Stoic focuses on process, on effort, on principle, never on what lies beyond control. When you stop being a slave to outcomes, manipulators cannot pull your strings. They may promise glory or threaten ruin, but you will stand unmoved, because your peace depends on your integrity, not on circumstances. The 13th lesson is beware of the crowd and the collective mind. There is no force more manipulable than the masses. The crowd follows trends, chants slogans, and shifts opinions like leaves in the wind. Manipulators use the collective to pressure the individual. Everyone is doing it, everyone agrees, you'll be left behind if you don't. Marcus Aurelius resisted the pull of the mob by constantly reminding himself to judge actions by reason, not popularity. Truth does not become false because it is unpopular, and lies do not become true because the majority accepts them. To be stoic is to stand firm against the madness of crowds, to use reason as your compass even when surrounded by noise. The manipulator loses power when you refuse to measure yourself by the collective's approval. The 14th lesson is embrace impermanence and mortality. One of the deepest manipulations arises from fear of loss of wealth, status, comfort, relationships, or life itself. Manipulators dangle these fears like chains, promising safety if you obey. But Marcus Aurelius looked death in the face every day and saw it for what it was, the natural end of all things. When you accept impermanence, you cannot be blackmailed by fear. Wealth is fleeting, reputation is fragile, relationships change, and even empires crumble. Why then let another control you with threats of loss? The Stoic, remembering death, walks unafraid. When you embrace mortality, no manipulator can enslave you with promises of security. The 15th and final lesson is live by principle, not persuasion. At the core of Stoicism is the unwavering belief that virtue is the only good, and vice the only evil. Everything else, pleasure, pain, wealth, poverty, praise, blame, is indifferent. A manipulator may try to persuade you with shifting arguments, appealing to your desires, your fears, or your ego. But if you are anchored in principle, persuasion cannot move you. Marcus Aurelius faced senators, generals, and citizens who sought to influence him, but he returned always to the question, is this in line with virtue? Is this just, courageous, wise, and temperate? When you live by principle, you are unshakable. Manipulation becomes powerless, for your compass points only to virtue, not convenience. And so, these 15 Stoic lessons form an unbreakable shield. Know yourself, master your emotions, see things clearly, reject flattery, embrace discomfort, refuse false guilt, guard your attention, accept reality, do not fear solitude, remember human equality, examine intentions, detach from outcomes, resist the crowd, embrace impermanence, and live by principle. Together, they make you untouchable by the webs of manipulators. Marcus Aurelius lived in a palace full of schemers, yet he remained sovereign of his own soul. That same sovereignty is available to you, not by fortune, not by power, but by discipline of thought and strength of character. Imagine what happens when you embody these lessons. No longer swayed by charm, no longer weakened by fear, no longer trapped by guilt or praise, you become a fortress of clarity. Manipulators may This is the essence of Stoic resistance to manipulation. For what is manipulation but the attempt to control your mind through fear, temptation, or illusion? And what is Stoicism but the refusal to surrender your reason to anything unworthy? When you realize your mind is sovereign, you no longer beg for freedom, it is already yours. The manipulator's hands grasp at empty air, for your soul is beyond their reach. So remember, manipulation will always exist, but it only has power if you allow it entry into your mind. Stand like Marcus Aurelius stood, calm, steady, principled. Let others weave their schemes, you walk the straight road of reason. Let others chase approval, you live by virtue. Let others fear loss, you embrace impermanence. When you do this, you not only avoid being manipulated, you become the kind of person no one dares to control, the kind of soul that cannot be bought, bent, or broken. And in this world of noise, deception, and endless persuasion, that kind of freedom is the rarest and most powerful treasure.